the CFS and our kind of representation on it and its ability to kind of express the opinions of students, graduate and even undergraduate?
Mm-hmm. Yep, so that's a good question. So I understand that the current external commissioner was just in Ottawa this past weekend at the Canadian Federation of Students annual general meeting. One thing that would be #1 priority for me would be to make sure that I'm at every meeting of the Canadian Federation of Students, just to make sure that I'm meeting the other representatives from all across Canada. So at the bare minimum, going to the meetings, and then above and beyond that, I was involved in organizing a rally, I believe back in February, in support of the TAs on campus who were considering striking. So for that, I organized with OPIRG and also the Canadian Federation of Students. We organized a rally outside of Sid Smith Hall. So #1 is going to the meetings, and #2 would be actively outreaching to the Canadian Federation of Students and organizing rallies and building more unity between the GSU of Toronto and the Canadian Federation of Students more broadly.
And Yunee?
Of course, I would also attend the meetings, and in between, I think I would like to maybe establish a way to get the CFS actually more involved with the GSU, or vice versa, I suppose. Maybe they could, representatives of the CFS could sometimes come to our GSU meetings and attend them, or at least, read up on the minutes, and we can have, regular discussions through email or whatever, to talk about what the mandates of the GSU are and try to get them implemented through the CFS.
Thank you. Very good. Once again, go to the audience. Does the audience have any further questions? No? Okay. We will continue moving on. Following the theme of portfolios, we're going to begin discussing the lobbying of the government. And this is kind of where a lot of the lobbying front from our kind of the graduate students' perspective should be focusing is kind of oriented around the finance and, of course, equality issues. So, of course, the external tends to focus more so because lobbying does tend to follow under a lot of the portfolios of the commissioners for the GSU. Typically, the external would deal with issues more related to gender equality. How do we improve kind of the policies surrounding that, and how do we lobby the government for that? But not only that, as you can probably actually see from the posters behind you, which maybe the camera's getting you some shots of, you see that Daniel is actually... Well. Oh, not well? Not well? Okay. Daniel has been very active, especially in organizing the drop fees strikes and protests, which I believe there was a very large turnout this year. Primarily, especially hitting upon the provincial government, which tends to be the largest provider of, financing for universities. So, in particular, let's start focusing on lobbying because it's going to be a couple questions on that. Let's start with the drop fees protests and how effective do you think they are, and if they're not that effective, how do you think we can improve them better? Of course, you get a lot of visual images from it, you get a lot of raising awareness, but as we still know, tuition fees still constantly rise. Especially, I believe, recently they allowed the tuition fees freeze. They stopped the tuition fee freeze, if I recall, in provincial government recently. So how do you think to make basically this even more effective than it is now? And what do you hope, or do you think that it is really effective now? The drop freeze protests. Yunee.
I think the most effective way to get the attention of the government to drop tuition fees would be for actually graduate students to directly reach out to them. And of course, not every graduate student can do that or is willing to, but I think there is a lack of awareness amongst graduate students in our university. So we have these rallies, but a lot of people actually don't know about it. A lot of people simply aren't aware how much it actually affects them. So I think it would be a good idea to provide a platform for students to petition and actually directly try to speak to government or funding agencies to try to get drops in tuition fees and get more government funding.
And Erin?
Well, I mean, I look at it as sort of a two-pronged approach. One, I think that visual sort of marches and rallies like this are really effective in a lot of ways, and we should never stop having those. But at the same time, you need to work within sort of systems of consultations and sort of the mechanisms that exist within the government to give opinion about what should happen. So, for example, I worked for the federal government for about 8 months in the public consultations division. So basically my job was to seek out public opinion on Canada's international trade agreements. And that sounds really good, except that nobody ever came to the public consultations. It was mostly business leaders and a few representatives from the nonprofit sector who came to these public consultations meetings. So I think on the one hand, we as students need to actively seek out where these public consultations are happening, whether they're at City Hall, whether it's meeting with our MPPs or our MPs, and making time to find out what structures are in place already for consultations. And then on the other hand, we need to make rallies and marches such as the February 1st all-out rally that we saw happen here. We need to make those more effective. And I think one way of doing that is to reach out to departmental unions. So I'm co-chair of the student caucus for my department, and for example, our caucus didn't know about the all-out rally, except I sort of heard of it by word of mouth. But I think that there need to be more sort of attempts to reach out to student unions at the departmental levels and to sort of build up that movement from the very sort of smallest kind of grassroots way possible.
Thank you. So continuing on the subject of lobbying the government, one thing which is fairly split shared duty between the external and Civics and Environment Commissioner is the lobbying of kind of the local government, so the specifically the Toronto mayor office. What issues do you think are really affecting graduate students at kind of this really local level with regards to kind of the GTA, and how do you see the external commissioner's ability to work with the Civics and Environment Commissioner, and how do you see them as kind of working to alleviate some of these concerns or remove them altogether? And Erin, start with you.
The negotiations that happened between QP 3902 and the University Administration over the past couple of months shows the kind of resistance there is at the administration level toward funding upper year PhD students, toward dropping tuition fees for students who have completed their required courses, graduate students. And also for reducing and putting a freeze on tutorial sizes. These are just a couple of issues that came up in the last few months, and they're issues that are not going to go away. I don't think that the current collective agreement is as good for graduate students as it could be. And I think that these are issues that we can not only work with university administration on, but also these issues are connected to citywide measures to reduce the sort of services that society has. So for example, I'm a research assistant. Before the new QP collective agreement, I was not unionized. Now I understand as of May 1st I will be, so that's great. But this is part of a citywide and a nationwide sort of attempt to lessen the scope that unions have and the sort of power that everyday workers have. So one thing that I would work on is not only increasing unionized benefits, but also connecting the student struggles to broader struggles in society.
Thank you. And Yunee?
I would like to lobby the local government agencies and the mayoral offices to get the GSU more recognized, and particularly focusing on RA-ships and reducing tuition fees, as well as increasing student stipends and implementing some sort of protective measures for graduate students that might not have funding, especially upper year PhD students.
Thank you. All right, so the final, well, not necessarily final, but the next large, out of the four largest portfolio things we're going to be discussing, levy groups, which typically OPERG, I guess Harvest Noon after the referendum may or may not fall under, and I believe employer group tend to be the three things which would fall under the levy portfolio and the external commissioner. This is of course I believe it's a joint portfolio between other commissioners as well, mainly civics, environment, and internal. I know employer is shared across external and internal. How do you see, but let's focus on more so OPERG and things like bike chain, which are considered levy groups that the GSU funds and supports. So let's start with the smaller ones first. So this will be a two-part question. Let's start with the smaller ones, such as bike chain, potentially Harvest Noon, depending on the referendum, and I believe U-turn may become might also fall under this portfolio. But how do you see the external commissioner helping and kind of directing those who are in, like the leaders, and how do you see yourself interacting with those people who run things like bike chain, potentially Harvest Noon, and potentially U-turn? Yunee?
I would like to gather as much information as possible from fellow graduate students on their opinions about bike chain and OPERG and Harvest Noon. And if it is something that, if they represent things that the graduate students would like to have representation on, then I would be more than willing to work with those groups and in order to represent the students.
And Erin?
Yeah, so I'm on the board of directors for Harvest Noon Cafe. I am a former employee of the Ontario Public Interest Research Group, so these are personally levy groups. Harvest Noon is not yet a levy group, but there's a chance that it could become one. These are personally levy groups that I support. However, in my role as external commissioner, I will be objective in evaluating sort of the support that these levy groups receive from the GSU. That being said, I think that levy groups are really important to a vibrant and exciting student life. I think that the services that OPERG provides are really important, and I think that what we saw over the past year with the current GSU exec trying to update the memorandum of agreement with OPERG, which would basically mean that the fees that students pay, that grad students pay into OPERG, which is $5 a semester, they would have the opportunity to opt out of those fees online. This is what the current GSU exec, not as a whole, it was separated on this issue, was attempting to do with OPERG. The problem with that is that you can't single out a single organization on campus for online opt-out. So the reason that this was struck down is because no student wants to see all campus organizations have their opt-outs online, because then you don't have a vibrant social life or a vibrant social community on campus. So I would continue to support OPERG and continue to support Harvest Noon in my role as external commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I think that you both have covered your sentiments with OPERG, so I will kind of discard that question for now. So another important thing that the external commissioner is usually spearheads is kind of the relationship to the undergrad community and how you guys interact with, and how the graduate student union interacts with the undergraduate student union here at U of T. Of course, how do you see that the graduate student union and the undergraduate student union do you think that they should work more closely on certain issues? Particularly, I guess, tuition would be a large issue that they could focus on, but how do you think, moving away from tuition discussion, how do you think they could kind of collaborate more on the social issues? Erin?
Well, so it's the UTSU, right? That's the acronym?
I think so.
University of Toronto Student Union.
Yeah.
Well, I collaborated with them as an OPERG employee in organizing this rally in support of TAs. So that's one way. This was not related to tuition directly. It was more related to making sure that there's a cap on tutorials in the current collective agreement. So this is one way that I collaborated with the University of Toronto Undergraduate Student Union in supporting them and letting them know that undergrads support TAs on campus. So I would continue to support the undergraduate union in issues such as that.
Yunee?
I would like to work more closely with the UTSU in order to get our green initiatives implemented, because I think in order to have the GSU's opinions on the environment, we also need the collective agreement of the whole university. So I would like to work with them more closely to, first of all, get an idea of what are some of the issues that the undergraduate students face, as well as the graduate students, and then work together to get those things recognized more broadly.
Thank you. And so we'll go to our audience for questions.
I have no questions.
No questions, okay. We will go with closing statements then. Yunee, you like to?
Okay. So I think I do not have very much experience, but I think I can bring a fresh perspective to the graduate students of the University of Toronto, and I would, as an external commissioner, I would work very hard to lobby government agencies as well as external bodies to get the voices of the graduate students heard.
Thank you. And Erin?
So I bring experience from a couple different areas that I think are really important to the role of external commissioner. A lot of the work that I am already involved in, my responsibilities as co-chair of my student union, my responsibilities as faculty representative at the OISE Graduate Student Association, my involvement as a campus activist with OPERG, and my previous experience as a labor union organizer. These are all skills and experiences that I already have and that I'm bringing with me to this role. And this would be a great opportunity for me to sort of bring all of those experiences together and direct them under the role of external commissioner. So I look forward to making sure that the voices of our graduate student union population are heard, and and I hope to get elected.
Thank you.